May 21st, 2025, City Council meeting of the City of Westlake at 7:03. Let's start with roll call.
If you just turn it down your volume down.
We're having technical difficulties.
There we go.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
Okay.
Thank you.
Roll call.
Brooke Brown.
Alec Robinson.
Kevin Glassine.
Phil McDuffie.
Sarah Hudson. Gavin Massengill, the mayor, is not able to attend this evening, so I am filling in for him tonight. All right. Do we have any comments? Where's Michaela?
No public comments.
Okay. All right. We will start with presentation.
Okay.
The presentation by Alter Studio on the assessment of residential building height and proposed height measurement.
Okay. Yeah, I'm Ernesto with Alter Studio Architects, and you all hired us to do some studies relating to various
Recording
ways
in progress.
to provide a series of tents in order to regulate height in a kind of rational and consistent way. We studied various models that are used by neighboring jurisdictions and are common, throughout, the United States. And there's two basic methods. One is known as a kind of parallel plane, where we're basically taking the topography and taking that plane that's undulating with the land and then moving it up to the height limit. And then the other method that's very common, so that is the method that's used by the city of Westlake Hills. Then another method that's fairly common that's used by the city of Austin is sort of a series of segmented planes, where you're going along the property line and assigning a certain depth. In the city of Austin, it's a 40-foot increment. And then you're getting high points or low points, and then from those, you're generating your height envelopes. So what we did is we studied several lots in Rolling Wood that have different characteristics in terms of shape and topography, in terms of whether they slope from the street back or back to the street or side to side. And we've included sort of a house, sort of a standard home, so you can sort of see the implications of these different tents on a residence. So the first one that we'll talk about is the kind of the one that the Zoning and Planning Commission have recommended, which is the parallel plane model. And like I said, that's the one sort of used in the city of Westlake Hills. It's right here. The difference between what is being proposed for Rolling Wood and Westlake Hills is because side setbacks in Rolling Wood are smaller. In order to avoid significant encroachment on neighbors, there's a kind of tapering effect on the sides. So it's a little bit. It takes some aspects of the segmented planes and puts them on the parallel planes, and so that's why you see this kind of, I guess, what you might call a little bit of a ziggurat on both sides, where the parallel plane is being stepped 1 foot for every foot that you come into the lot.
Can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
Sorry to interrupt.
No.
But you mentioned that Westlake has bigger side yard setbacks.
Right.
Do you happen to remember what they
25 feet.
25?
Yeah.
Or 10 or 15?
Right.
Okay.
My memory is that you're 15, right? And
15 on some, or 10?
We're 25 total.
25 total.
A minimum of 10 on
Right.
any side.
Right.
Minimum 10, yeah, so it's got to 20.
Right, and so that's my understanding, and I do apologize, it's been a while since I did a house in Rolling Wood. My understanding is your rear setback is 25 feet, so it's
20 feet.
20 feet. So it's more in Westlake's side setbacks are more like your rear setbacks.
Yeah, okay, thank you, sorry.
Yeah.
Is there a way possibly to zoom
Absolutely,
out
yes.
on that?
So, and I can go around it too, so that you can see sort of how, and as you can see, as the topography undulates, and in this case is going down from the street, the height plane is doing the same. And then you can see how this, what I call this kind of like ziggurat or this stepping would prohibit someone from building a home and having a very large, facade very close to their neighbor, their side neighbor. Of course, they can, if they want that height house, they can just bring it in at the point to where the stepping aligns with the full height of the parallel plane. So that seems to be the sort of the leading contender based on what zoning and planning. This is the very basic version of the segmented planes, where you're going back a certain distance for every segment. Often it's 40 feet, and then you pick either low points or high points. So as you go back in the segments, you essentially get 4 corners, and you can either decide to use the low point of those 4 corners or the high point, and then extrude up to create these very clear tents. And actually these are more, this is where we get the term tent, because obviously it looks like a tent. Now, no jurisdiction typically allows just the tent. They typically then will have the tent plus sort of like an auxiliary height limit, sort of a cap. And that's what you're seeing in these other ones. And so the common one, like the one that we have in the city of Austin, is there's just an overall height limit, and it's just flat. And that's what you're seeing here. This gold one, which is probably just too complicated and pointless, is combining the parallel plane as the sort of truncating plane for those segments. And there's really very little value in that, because it pretty much mimics what you would get with a parallel plane and just introduces unnecessary complexity. But these other ones are, sort of like a method that is used in cities. It must be said that it's more typical and probably more appropriate for sort of core urban areas like you see in Austin, where you have narrower lots, and the chances of having significant cross slope is very minimal, because you have over a 50-foot lot, chances are you're not going to have a lot of cross slope over 50 feet. It's generally not sort of a great solution for more suburban areas like this, where you can have wider lots and you can have significant cross slope. And we'll see that in some of the other examples that have those kinds of lots. So I'm going to go to the next property. This one is sloping it has a significantly more slope, and it is sloping towards the street. Now, we didn't redesign the house, so it's kind of confusing, because like the house looks like the backyard is facing the street, but that's my understanding. That's not the case. But you see how then the ramifications of the different approaches on this lot. And then there's another property that is what you would consider just basically much more of a flat lot. And again, obviously these are the easier ones where there's less difference between the approaches. They tend to end up kind of netting the same. And then you get a lot like this, which gives you is a very wide lot, and so you get significant distortions and complexities with the other sort of tenting approaches. They get kind of a little unwieldy. It would be, unfortunately, we didn't have that lot, but if you had a lot with a lot of cross slope that had this kind of width, it would be even sort of more complicated, because then you wouldn't want to assign the segmenting parallel to the street. You'd want to perpendicular to the street. You'd want to assign it parallel to the street, and that gets into sort of a level of complexity that may be hard to you know, adjudicate in terms of how you write the ordinance and how it's interpreted. And that's basically it as far as what we've done. I'm happy to go back to any of these and show, zoom in and show more clarity on it. I don't know if I need to answer any questions.
Yeah, maybe could you just like go back and set sort of the context, like what are these houses, what are the lots, like?
Yeah, so these are all, it's all the same house. It's all the
all
same
the
sort of
same.
house design, if you will.
So how did you come up with that design, or like is that one of the?
I can help.
Yeah, that would be great, Dave.
I'm just curious, like what is the square footage on that house, like? You know?
What we have here is Dave Bench, 1 Randolph. What we have here are 5 properties that were essentially volunteered by either people on P&Z or other interested people. And we used there, if you'll recall, last time that there was a presentation, there was some concern that, yeah, we were showing these boxes as they were portrayed as parallel plane or by segmenting that were empty. And there was concern that it didn't really provide a practical picture of what's going on, and wouldn't it be cool if we could put a house in there? And so Tony Stein, who has one of these properties, said that we could use a plan that had been devised for his property. He doesn't expect to execute it, but he had hired an architect to develop a plan, and then we could use that and show it inside of his property and whether or not it would work within the parallel plane. And then we would use that same plan, house plan, and just project it on the other properties too, just for the sake of scale and so you could see. Does that help?
Yeah, that totally helps. So
Okay.
maybe it'd be like cool to see the presentation from that perspective, because I forgot about that, but now I totally remember us doing that in the last meeting. So yeah, I think that the concept would be like, in my view, is like, hey, this is what he could have built 2 years ago or today, maybe even, like this is the plan. How does these different like proposals or possibilities affect what would do that house? So can maybe I kind of wish.
And one thing that would help me is if you zoom in on one and then drop the perspective closer to ground level so you can see the house under the plane,
Sure.
and then hold it still because I'm getting anxious.
I apologize.
And I think if you could zoom
There we go.
as much as possible, that would
Yeah.
help too.
Yeah.
Oh, but do we have like we don't have like a like this is what it is. Well, I guess that is the house. You can.
It is.
Okay.
And it's a house that was
So that's what it
developed-
would look like
Yeah.
without any cropping or any modifications. Is there like, I guess, is there one? That's
Yeah, so I can show you some slight areas where there's encroachment, just so you
Yeah,
can
that's
see.
what I'm getting at. Yeah,
So,
yeah.
and it's actually easier to see on the gold. So, let me go to the gold one. The gold one just is clearer. So you can see here, there's a little bit of encroachment.
But this is like what you're showing here is like the parallel plane.
Right.
Okay, the first two at the top. Are
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's very slight, but there are areas, obviously, if you were designing it with this, you would have to nip and tuck a bit and adjust the design slightly, but it wouldn't affect the overall house. I believe it was said that this was a 6,500 square foot house.
I think that was somewhere in that.
So it's a nice sizable home. Obviously, there's much more volume that could be built out under the tent.
Okay.
Can you do a 360 on
Yeah.
this one house?
Yeah, so here I'm going 360, and you can see that eave slightly is projecting through. You see, do you all see this area here? Let me zoom in. There's your
It's easier
encroach.
if you get the perspective below the tent,
Yeah,
because we can't see it through the tent. You can see
there you
it.
go. Thanks. You're right. There you go. You see how that soffit is projecting through. And there are eve exemptions in some jurisdictions. A lot of these things are just not really needed on wider lots. The architect will just adjust accordingly. So.
And if I may interrupt, what I understood on this plan, on that model, that house would work if you just move it over a foot.
Right.
So you could-
Yeah.
You could make it work on that lot.
Yeah, you could, yeah, very good point. You can in fact, you can clearly see here, you move this house over a foot, there's plenty of room on this side. Take advantage of the situation you all have in Rollingwood where you can,
And then from the, can you show the other,
the segmented
the
one.
segmented one
Yes.
from that same angle?
And let me go to the one that would actually be used, like a segmented with truncation, not using ones that, so, this is using low points. So these are segments, but with truncating for the low points.
Okay. Why would someone do, I mean, I can't imagine someone would pick the low point, sometimes.
Well, a low point will obviously make houses less, large, so.
It's a code choice, not a.
Oh, yeah, but I think he was saying, oh, wait, okay.
Yeah, so in Austin,
If you write the code either from the.
Yeah.
lower or from
Oh, from the high.
the low point would be more in tune with the way, Westlake Hill's attitude is, like, let's keep houses low under the tree line. In Austin, it was more about, letting people build a little taller. So you can see this one has no violations. It's totally fine. And then here with the high points, obviously it's well above, but it doesn't take much. You can see you could build a pretty monstrous house with using the high points and the segmented tents.
'Cause that's what that is, that's the high point.
Right, because you can see how you have a lot of volume above the house. It's almost like you could almost add another floor to this house. So you're getting into something that looks almost more multifamily than,
Top deck up there, see down.
yeah, top deck and then some.
It's getting green.
Yeah. And that's there's not a lot of difference then after that, because these were just different ways of one thing that we did study, but it's totally minor. But I think if you're thinking in terms of the segmented planes, is establishing the height of the segment from the property line versus the setback. And typically you would want to do it, you'd want to achieve the same height, but you'd want to start on the property line because you're going to get less distortion of grade based on existing conditions. Say someone has built retaining walls in the setback, the house is demoed, it will create an artificial tent, but going to the proper line is usually better. So there's a study here that reflects that, but it's really only relevant if you're seriously considering the segments.
And it sounds like what I'm hearing you say is segmented is unnecessarily complicated and not as so appropriate for big lots. It's better for these small lots like in Austin.
That's how we see it in the neighboring jurisdictions, and that's the problem that you need to think about with the segments also, especially when you're trying to protect trees and you want people to do good design, is that the segments force the architect or the designer to push the volume of the house into the segment, and which is less than ideal. Like, I think as a code writing organization, land code writing organization, you want to, the trees aren't moving, and you want people to build beautiful homes, as beautiful as they can build. And so creating that kind of artificial constraint on where those segments are is a little bit of a problem. It was desired in Austin at the time that it was chosen, because the goal was to have people break up the volumes of homes because they're so tight together. So they wanted, in fact, one of the things that happened in Austin, there was side setback articulation. They didn't want people building, flat walls on these very narrow lots. And so the sidewall articulation worked with the segmented tents in order to encourage people to build houses that were more discrete volumes.
And we considered sidewall articulation in the committees, but it just seemed like too micromanaging people's home design for rolling wood.
Right, and you have large enough setbacks that it's kind of not really, it's not so relevant, yeah.
Alright.
Can you show me again the height, like you know how you showed that one? When it was
Yeah.
the high point, how much space there was between, can you show me like
On the
from the parallel plane one?
Yeah,
And to
so-
the low point one, I guess, just so I can see the difference.
yeah, so, here it is, and you can see, I'm sorry, because the stuff is in the background, so it's a little hard, but you can see you have a pretty good amount of space still. So this could be this roof pitch could be taller,
Mm-hmm.
and it would still fit nicely in there. Yeah, this one might be easier to see because I can.
And what was the difference between the gold and the not gold?
Well, the gold is really just it's kind of causing confusion. First of all, this is just a replication. I should have just deleted this one. This is the gold that matters, is where you're combining the parallel plane with the segments. This one you're combining the parallel plane with the parallel plane, so you're just getting parallel plane. So we should
So
have.
those two are the same.
These two are the same.
I got
Right. Yeah, and these two they describe a real difference. And I can take you to another property, maybe that might be nice.
Just like a different lot, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay, there you go.
There's a different lot. Here you go, the parallel plane, and this is where you can see the advantages, so to speak, that the parallel plane will force this, they can't, as their lot drops off, they can't just build a really tall element here. But they can build a little bit taller on this side where, they have better higher topography, so.
How did you make that house do that? Did you just like lower one on the side, or how did you?
Yeah, we just basically used our best judgment. If you put this house on this lot, what would your typical architect builder do? And they would typically just build these kind of tall foundation walls.
Gotcha.
Yeah, they wouldn't, obviously, and that's something that is important to note, like, someone who wants a certain kind of massing, they can lower grade, build retaining walls close to the house in an artful way, and still get a little extra height. So there's still there are tools in the tool belt for the architect and builder, designer, to still be able to achieve visual results and work with the tenting. So, and then let me go to another lot. Obviously, this was a flatter lot, it makes it fairly easy to be under the plane.
Oh, so wait, the first one was like, this is the flat lot.
Well,
Fine,
it's
and
a
then
little
the first
flatter,
one was
yeah. The first one has more slope.
okay.
Yeah, it's I wouldn't call it slopey, but the second one's the real slopey lot.
Yeah.
This one's pretty darn flat. It's gonna be hard to find a flatter lot in Rollingwood than this one. And then the last lot would be like a kind of, a kind of oddly shaped, long, wide lot with some topography. But the characteristic is mostly, now obviously this house doesn't fit on this lot. We would have to have altered the design, but wasn't just.
That's a big garbage lot.
Oh, is that?
That was a tough lot.
Yeah, this would be a tough lot.
That's Duke's place. Yeah.
That's Rockaway Cove, the one where he lives
The one he
in.
lives in.
The one where his house.
this is really interesting. I think if, like, maybe some screenshots of this would be cool too to show. I don't know if planning and zoning is gonna, like, look at these or see these or not.
They've
but-
already seen it.
Okay, they did,
Yeah.
okay.
They've already voted on it.
Alright,
Oops, sorry.
And if you, look at the Zoom, for this most recent planning and zoning commission meeting, these show up nicely on
Okay.
the Zoom screens, so
Cool.
they're well presented.
Well, you guys have obviously put a lot of effort into this and really appreciate it. It's really helpful
Yeah.
for the community too, at large, to understand
Yeah, no, it's our
how
pleasure.
this would work.
All right, any more questions or anything else anybody wants to see? All right,
Thank you for
Thank you
your
very
work
much.
for Rollingwood.
Thank you all.
I know we paid you a fee, but I kind of feel like you volunteered a bit too, because there was a lot of effort that went into that, I can tell. And
Yeah, well, you know, it's nice to be able to help out too. So
we appreciate it.
the fee was only partial compensation.
Right.
Helping you all write good ordinances is.
Well, I
is
can tell there's a real public service component to that, and we appreciate that. Thank you.
all right, we will move on to the consent agenda, and I have comments on two of these, so I think we'll just take them one at a time. So, item number 3, discussion and possible action on the minutes from the March 26th, 2025 joint council and planning and zoning commission meeting. Do I have a motion?
Move approval?
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, motion by Brooke, second by Phil. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Okay, motion passes. Agenda item number 4, discussion and possible action on the minutes from the April 16th, 2025 city council meeting. I have, and I'm sorry, I meant to call about this and get it fixed before the meeting, and I didn't. There is a typo on the very last page. And it's a word, but I don't think it's the word that we intended to have. In agenda item number 16, the last paragraph, it says, members of city council expressed interest in the park commission perusing next steps. I think it's supposed to say pursuing next steps, so we can just fix that. That was my only comment. We have a motion on,
Move approval with the change on page,
the last page.
6.
3, 4, 5 of the minutes from perusing, item 16, from perusing to pursuing.
Is there a second?
second?
Motion by Brooke, second by Alec. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Okay, motion passes 5-0. Agenda item number 5.
5.
Discussion possible action regarding acceptance of Michael Rhodes' resignation from the Planning and Zoning Commission. Do I have a motion?
Move approval of item number 6.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion by Brooke, second by Phil. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Okay, motion passes 5-0. Agenda item number 6, discussion and possible action regarding acceptance of a water utilities easement granted by Olga Kobzar and located at 14 Tremont Drive. Izzy's not here, right?
Right.
Do we have an explanation? And is it a water utility easement or wastewater? Does it make a difference how we describe it?
No, it's been worded so as to allow either water or wastewater services
Okay.
in there. The intention of this particular easement is, I think council is aware of it. At that particular property, there's an issue with the discharge line that comes into the sanitary sewer from that property on 14 Tremont that needs to be corrected. Temporarily, the discharge from that house, the wastewater, is being routed above ground through a pipe on the adjacent property at 13 Tremont, through an agreement, kind of a verbal agreement with that neighbour. that pipe is temporary, it's above ground, it's fairly vulnerable given its placement. So it's important to public health that we rectify the situation as quickly as possible. So to be able to do that, the mayor and staff, even preceding me, sought with Ms. Kobar to get the easement in there so we could do the appropriate repairs to the sewer system.
And we've got all of the issues with the grinder pump and all that worked out, and who's
Yeah,
responsible, and,
Yeah, the grinder pump is most certainly on the resident. It's the discharge line as it kind of comes into the sewer system that's owned and operated by the city. There's that pipe that connects to it.
Okay.
If Izzy was here, you could say it more eloquently. But it is after the grinder pump, before
Right.
the main trunk.
okay, all right. Anybody else have any questions?
No, but I was involved in some discussions on this, and at some point, we're gonna consider defining the homeowner's responsibility all the way to the sewer line connection. And right now, it's we pick it up from the, grinder pump, but that's probably needs to change.
Right, I've spoken with the mayor a few times since I've been here about that exact same thing. He wanted to make sure that this was taken care of first. And then we can make sure that this particular situation doesn't become the city's issue moving forward.
Do we have a motion?
Motion to accept the easements.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Kevin, second by Brooke. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Okay, motion passes 5-0. All right, on to the regular agenda. Agenda item number 7, discussion and possible action on a proposed ordinance amending chapter 107 of the City of Rollingwood's Code of Ordinances related to residential building heights and height measurement. So, the subject of our presentation. Any discussion? Or do we need a motion before we can have the discussion?
Y'all can discuss.
Okay.
Mayor Pro Tem, Brooke Brown, this item comes to the council now for a decision based on a 5-0 vote from the Planning and Zoning Commission. As y'all are aware, this is a proposal regarding setting new standards for building height within the city of Rollingwood and methods of measurement for building height. It adopts the recommendation that has come from originally from the CRCRC, and then after about a year's worth of review at Planning and Zoning, it has been recommended to the council for approval as proposed, virtually as proposed by the CRCRC. I'm happy to walk through the terms of the changes if the council would like. I've also done my usual thing of clarifying edits to the language without substantive change, except for one exception, which I can talk about. But it would be my motion to recommend approval of the proposed ordinance with the edits that have been proposed, subject to the council's discussion and the consideration of the one substantive change, which is to section 107.83, lines 112 to 118, that provide an additional clause to the special exception that would be allowed for lots that are on a floodplain or drainage easement.
It's a very long motion. Do we have a second for discussion?
I'm ready to discuss it. Do we have to have a second to discuss it, or?
Yeah.
We have a motion, so.
Need a motion, so might as well get a second.
Okay.
I'll second it for point of discussion.
Okay. Motion by Brooks, second by Phil.
So, may I?
Yes.
So, I want to say this, I think this is a good ordinance. I really appreciate the CRCRC's work on this and planning and zoning's work on it. I know a lot of people put a lot of effort and a lot of time into it, and it's very much appreciated, and I think it's really helped the whole community's understanding of the issue and of the solution. So it's really remarkable to see that much care and effort put into it. I've reviewed Councilmember Brown's edits to the ordinance that are clarifying, and I concur with her suggestions on the clarifying edits. I do want to discuss the special exception process. Special exception, my understanding is a easier way to go to get relief from the ordinance than a variance would be, because a variance would have to show hardship, I believe is the term, which is narrowly defined in the law, and a special exception would allow homeowners to get some relief from the height limit, but it has to have specific criteria set out to qualify for the special exception. And Councilmember Brown, I think you mentioned a substantive edit which would clarify the qualification for the special exception involving being adjacent to, was it green space or drainage?
Floodplain or drainage easement.
Okay, so that means that the theory is that if it's next to a drainage easement or floodplain, then it's not going to annoy the neighbor there to go higher.
Yes.
Okay.
And with a limit of a maximum of 5 feet of additional height from what would otherwise be the limit on height. So there's a cap, so to speak, on the additional relief that could be granted.
Right.
In that situation. That's in the proposal, but the language that I suggested adding would be, it said in such cases, in the case of special exception were granted, the board may grant up to 5 additional feet of building height. I added the language such that the maximum height limits in 10771B, the 35 feet, are increased up to an additional 5, may be increased up to an additional 5 feet of building height across the building footprint. So the 5 additional feet didn't quite say all of that. It just said 5 additional feet. You don't know if that's across the entire building, if that's across the entire buildable area. So I added that as clarifying.
And would that additional 5 feet change the 25-foot height at the distance 10 feet from the property line?
It would change it to 30 feet.
Okay.
And then the 35 feet would be 40 feet.
And why would we go up to 40 feet if we're really just recognizing the fact that that side yard is adjacent to a green space or floodplain?
It could be the drainage easement or the floodplain isn't necessarily limited to the side yard. There can be a floodplain. My lot has floodplain across the back of the lot. Other lots have floodplain that may be diagonal to the lot.
Okay.
You know, there's a house on Pickwick that's on stilts. That most of that lot is in the floodplain. So you can't quite. It's not absolutely granted. That is subject to the approval of the Board of Adjustment about how much of the lot would be, how much the height, across what part of the lot the height would be increased. But it is possible, this language makes it possible to do it across the entire lot,
Okay.
up to 5 feet from from 25 to 30 and 35 to 40.
And can I ask legal a question about that? Is that, if we write a special exception in that manner, is a homeowner entitled to the special exception if they show the conditions that are set forth in the ordinance, that is being adjacent to floodplain or drainage easements,
If you put the word shall in there, then yes.
but we didn't, right?
Then, yeah, then they're
And
not
so-
entitled.
So we're preserving the discretion of the Board of Adjustment to grant or not grant that based on how appropriate it
Sure,
is?
the reasonable discretion.
Okay,
And the test is used in this section is the adverse impact on the lot's buildable area
okay. All right.
from the floodplain or the drainage easement.
Okay, thank you for the explanation.
There's another place in this ordinance where special exception was used, and the recommendation from council would be to keep that as a variance. That was addressed at P and Z, and the change that was suggested by council from special exception to variance was approved in the P and Z proposal. And if you, Duke Garwood gave a very cogent response on, in other types of situations, just like we have for other building code requirements, a variance may be granted if there are certain findings. And he says, I'm kind of the godfather of the variances in Rollingwood, and the process works well if you have an odd lot or an odd situation or that impacts your ability to build within reasonable limits. And so that was, the P&Z was comfortable with leaving that a variance for conditions other than the floodplain or the drainage easement. So that's, I wanted to make sure that it was clear that that variance is still a variance, or that variance is a variance. That condition is a variance. Other conditions would remain subject to a variance standard.
So my question on the floodplain issue is that there's no definition of what classification, if you will, of floodplain? You know, is the 1-year floodplain, the 500-year floodplain, which floodplain? Because that makes a huge difference on how many homes this potentially affects, or how many lots it potentially affects.
Do you have any suggestions on what would be appropriate?
I don't know how many homes are potentially affected. That was gonna be my other question. How many that we have that are abutting a floodplain? To know what the difference would be.
That, Mr. Bench, would you be able to answer that question?
And I have a question about that too, is,
Okay, so we just say that should some portion of the buildable area reside on or, the altered version is reside on or have a common boundary with a floodplain or drainage easement. And we don't say, what category of floodplain,
if we
you
added,
know, one year, 100-year, 500-year.
what's unbuildable?
Okay, yeah, well, generally, most of our ordinances are written around the 100-year flood.
Mhm.
And it is probably worth noting that within this discussion. But I think whenever we were coming up with this, when we were thinking through this, I think we were considering it to be the 100-year floodplain, which, as you know, government entities like the USGS could change that at any time. So that was really kind of what we were after, is we wanted to give people the latitude to be able to work even as floodplain definitions are changing.
And is a 100-year floodplain, you cannot permit a structure in it, can you?
I'm not an engineer, but usually as long as you don't raise the base flood elevation by a foot, and you do all the appropriate things so that you're not, then most cities will allow building in the 100-year floodplain. But I don't know what our ordinances do, and I don't know.
You can build in a 100-year floodplain?
Yeah, I've worked in several cities that have 100-year floodplains, and it was quite flat, and they absolutely extensively built there. But it was related to the base flood elevation, and the amount of dirt you can bring in, move around. You couldn't bring dirt in, you could just move it around on the lot.
And so in lies the reason why you would want to add in 5 feet to the allowable height so that you could accommodate for that flooding. The notion would be that you may not be building livable area in that additional 5 feet. You would be raising the structure so that you're able to accommodate the flood. Does that make sense?
So maybe instead of it being adjacent to or sharing a boundary with, it should say if it's on 100-year floodplain, maybe? I don't know, I'm just trying to figure out.
Well, it says some portion of the
Reside on
buildable
or be
area
adjacent to.
reside on or have a common boundary with.
Because if you have a common boundary with a 100-year floodplain that somebody builds a house on, should you get to go higher just because they're on floodplain?
No, that's not the way it reads. It's
Okay.
adjacency to the floodplain that's on the lot.
Yeah, it's on the lot.
Oh, okay.
On the lot.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm a little slow on this.
There we are.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay, are drainage easements, are they not typically, is that the same as like a utility easement where it's usually 5 feet on each side of the property line, or how big are the?
I think we have very few actual drainage easements in Rolling Wood. We do, I think in this instance in which this provision would work, it would have to be a drainage easement recorded with the city of Rolling Wood.
It's like Ashworth's new drainage easement, or Kevin Shell probably
Yes,
has one.
exactly.
Those-
Are the drainage easements that run on what was private what was homeowner-owned property between the Nixon and the houses on Hatley and Pleasant Cove. So there, you know, those are dedicated easements. They'll have a meets and bounds description. It's not, it wouldn't be an easement that, it wouldn't be property where a drainage facility is located, because that still remains private property and there's no easement to the city for a drainage facility. If there's an actual dedicated drainage easement, then this provision would allow the exception.
So the intention is, though, that the special exception is only allowed if the drainage easement is in the buildable area of the lot.
The way it's written is that there's a drainage easement, some portion of the drainage, the buildable area is on or has a boundary with the buildable area. The buildable area, let me start up. The floodplain or drainage easement must either be on the buildable area or have a boundary with the buildable area and an extreme adverse impact on the lot's buildable area. So you could have a situation where the slope's so steep adjacent to it, or there's some other condition where it's even though it's not on the buildable area, it's affecting the buildable area. That's the way it's written.
I'm having a hard time understanding an example of where, if it's not on the buildable area, how would it impact?
Well, there's
the-
like
the
one
home.
on Inwood where the water goes actually through part of the house where they've bridged over the drainage. Right? And that
Right,
would be
but-
an example.
You couldn't have built on the ground, but that would be within the buildable area.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about if it's adjacent to.
There's one on Hubbard Circle too, that's kind of like that.
But that's also not in the buildable area.
Sorry about that. Checking my message and it came up music.
Yeah, those are both in the setbacks, and so I'm trying to understand how being adjacent to that would necessitate being able to go higher.
I don't know if Mr. Bench wants to address that or not.
Well,
On the drainage easement.
Again, I think what our intent was to not penalize someone who is in a flood-prone area or an area where the city asks to be able to put a drainage easement in. They would not be penalized by being that close to the water. We would give them some additional height so that they can overcome any kind of hardship that flooding or an easement would create. Now again, this is all subject to BOA approval. So, it would be up to the BOA to decide whether or not there's really something there. Does it really merit the additional 5 feet or doesn't it? And, and what we wanted to do was to provide at least the latitude to enable it. Just a little breathing room. We had been asked about this. Was a discussion within CRCRC, and there were interested people about this particular thing. Okay?
I could see a just as I'm sitting here thinking, I could see a situation where a drainage easement would take what would otherwise be the entire side yard, where you would have potentially some equipment, air conditioner unit, and you would want some accommodation to be able to, even though the drainage easement's not in the buildable area, it takes up the whole side yard, and you'd need some additional room or space.
I can tell you, like, an example would be, I've got a severely sloped lot with a seasonal creek that runs in the back of it down at Inwood Circle. And I could see wanting to cantilever a house out over that a little bit so that you stay out of that floodway. But that's gonna, if you're measuring from natural grade, that's gonna severely limit how high I can build. Because I might be 10 feet off the ground hanging out over the drainage. So that's just an example, I think, that applies. Of course, I already built my house.
Or if your backyard is taken up by the drainage easement
Yeah.
and you want, some outdoor area, then
Well, I don't think anybody's whole backyard is gonna be taken up by the drainage easement.
I'm comfortable with it because of the
20
point that Mr. Bench made, that the BOA still has to approve this.
Yes.
I mean, if this was some automatic thing, they'd be entitled to it, I would be concerned about it more. But I think with the BOA, I'm okay with it.
Given our topography, you might just want to be a little sensitive to some of our special situations. And I believe this is it.
or have your driveway outside the drainage easement.
And if I might add, so while you were discussing that, I pulled up our GIS map. Assuming the accuracy of the GIS map, the only 100-year floodplain that exists within the city limits is, it follows Eanes Creek. It starts right there at Edgegrove, kind of goes up around the back of Peters, and then just follows the north side of Bee Caves there and terminates at Delana. So, roughly counting while you're talking, about 10 properties there would be affected that currently have buildings, and about 7 that don't have buildings.
That's 100-year flood.
100, yes.
And we don't define what kind of floodplain. here.
Understood,
It
but
just
for the
says-
discussion of should be 100 or 500 or what, the 100-year floodplain affects about 17 properties, of which 10 have buildings.
Yeah, well, I'm pretty sure that, like Brooke said, she's got a floodplain, but if that's not a 100-year floodplain, then hers is less than that, and that would affect everybody on that. So there, without a
From the,
modifier, it's just hard to know how many properties this potentially affects. And who all would be
yeah, I would not
available.
oppose having it apply to the 100-year floodplain.
No, yeah.
100 or less?
No, 100 or more.
I think 100 or more.
100 or more.
And I don't know what
So if it floods
our
every,
administrator is looking at, but when we have the infrastructure improvement plan that Kay Freeze did, modeled the 100-year floodplain in it, and there's several, like my backyard,
Right.
like the creek bed that runs through open yards on Wallace and down Wallace. Those were shown as 100-year floodplains, including
Okay.
in the creek that comes through, the dry creek that comes through the park property and onto Pleasant Cove.
Okay, I have a question about that. I'm sorry, maybe I'm confused, but my understanding of 100-year floodplain means that it's gonna flood every 100 years is the definition of it. In my creek in the back of my house floods every year. So are we saying that it only covers 100-year floodplain or 100 or less?
The creek behind you doesn't flood every
Well, it
every
would flood
year.
a structure every year. I mean, it runs water that deep that's like white water with a little waterfall. So,
There's runoff that goes through it every time it rains,
right.
but that's a difference between,
So what's the difference between 10-year floodplain and 100-year floodplain? 10-year floods more often, 10 times more often, right?
well, I don't know, it's 10 times more often.
Well,
That's
I believe
that's
it's
the
10
very
times,
definition.
10 times more
Yeah.
likely.
it's the very
10 times.
definition, 10 times more likely to
Yeah.
flood. So what I'm saying is, we want to give relief to the areas that are more likely to flood, not less likely to flood, right?
Correct.
So we want to do 100 years or less.
I agree.
That makes more sense to me too.
Don't we?
That's logically the way I think about it, but
If
No,
it's a 10-year floodplain, you would want to give them relief even more so than 100
100,
years.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna look
All
up what's in
all
the
these
K
are
freeze.
up to the Board of Adjustment
right,
providing that, but I do think it's a 100-year floodplain or less, you know, so if it's 50-year, 10-year, or up to 100-year, then,
yeah, but you don't usually define a 1-year
well, I understand
flood,
that,
floodplain,
but
that's not the concern usually, so, okay, well, we can
Right.
just leave
So,
that the way
so a
it is.
100-year floodplain would contain the 50-year floodplain and the 10-year floodplain. The 100-year
Right.
floodplain is the
Correct.
extent of the
Right.
flooding in
Correct.
a
It's
in a 100-year
inclusive of
event.
it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay,
They're
that's very
progressively
good.
larger.
That's- Yes,
Right.
that's,
So a
Yeah.
10-year
Yeah.
floodplain is most certainly within
Thank
the
you.
100-year floodplain.
mine might be in the 5,000-year floodplain. So you guys probably wouldn't want to give me any relief from
What about
floodlight.
what about the Ice Age?
Yeah, that's true.
That was 10,000 years.
okay.
Well, I'm trying to find the infrastructure improvement plan, and it's always a pain to do. So,
Yeah, at this point,
is there a, Nikki or Michaela, can you tell me where to find it on our website? I know there's a link to it in one of the times on the left-hand column, but I don't know which.
So at the top, if you go to Meet Your Government on our webpage,
If you go to, I'm sorry,
Meet Your Government,
okay,
and then in the middle, under Planning and Development, if you just click on Planning and Development, and then once you click on that, it'll be down the side panel on the left.
okay.
yeah, at this point,
And if you could go to, can you put up page 43 of that on our screen?
Yeah.
This shows the,
Oh, they did. Oh, actually, I can pull it up here. I have a computer.
I remember it.
There we go.
this is where the city is looking at doing drainage improvements. They've identified that, it's the plan that identifies the top drainage improvements. And I would think that's what you want to use, whatever that is.
I'm okay with it as it's written,
You know,
with the BOA.
Well, then you think
With
we
your-
need to add the language of a 100-year floodplain?
No, I don't
Well,
think so.
see, I've always looked at this, cause that's what this legend shows.
Oh, okay.
Councilwoman Brooke, what page?
Um,
43.
it
43.
is page 43.
Yeah, a 100-year floodplain is a more significant flood than, a 100-year flood is a more significant flood than a 5-year flood or a 10-year flood,
that's true. That's a way to think about it too.
right?
That's true, but
So you-
still.
This, what I'm if we can pull it up, I can pass this over to you.
I was gonna say, the water level is lower with a 1-year flood
This,
plain
what this,
than with a
what,
10-year flood.
what this
that's
page
good.
in the
That makes
study
sense.
indicates are the drainage areas of the city that need attention.
Right.
And so that's what I'd be comfortable with, whatever that is. Or leave it floodplain.
That makes sense.
I would leave it as it is and let the Board of Adjustment figure it out when they get it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's a good ordinance. I like all the work that's been done on it.
It show, as I understand the legend, this is
100 years.
This is a 100-year inundation, anywhere
I
from
know.
3 inches
This is
to
hers.
10 inches,
Just kidding.
depending on how
I'll
blue
hand
it
that to her.
is.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I understand.
It goes,
That's why I've always thought that this map showed the 100-year floodplain.
yeah, it does.
Yeah, I'm fine with it.
Okay. Well, I think at this point, we just move on with what we have.
Call vote?
There is one other decision that needs to be made, and that is the language at line 42. If y'all recall, the current ordinance uses the term building height, comma, residential as a defined term to define building height. I think we can do away with that kind of cumbersome term and replace it with building height. And then reference the residential zoning code. So building height is used in the in chapter 107, division 2 of the residential zoning district means. And then if you turn to the second page, section 107.71 at line 74, and throughout section 107.71, my edits would use the term building height consistently through that section. If we don't do that, if you look back at lines 62 to 65, this is the language in the existing code that ties the definition building height residential to the residential zoning code. So what I'm proposing is just a simpler way and less convoluted way to use that term, defined term.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, it's fine to me.
Me too.
And I would recommend that we do it as I just described it, retain the deletion of line 63 through 65, but now use the term building height as opposed to building height, comma, residential.
Can we take that as an amended motion?
I think I'll state it in the motion.
Okay.
We had a motion
We already
already.
have a motion.
have a motion, we didn't get a vote on that motion.
Was somebody
Phil
seconded
seconded
it?
Yeah, we hadn't had a
seconded it.
We
vote.
didn't vote
yet.
on
We
it,
hadn't
but
had
we
a
had a
vote.
second on it.
That's correct,
Yes.
and we just need to vote.
Right.
Well, what I was, I knew when I made the motion that I didn't want to add all the things that still needed,
Well, then rescind your motion and remake your motion.
I'm going to rescind the motion and remake my motion.
I I'm fine with that.
Okay.
I move we adopt ordinance 2025-05-21-06 as contained in the packet, the item with the Brook Brown edits. It's shown Brook Brown definitions of existing grade. I'm sorry, Brook Brown edits to building height ordinance 519-2025 with the changes as proposed in that version of the proposed ordinance, and that those changes include the changes at lines 42 through 44. And that is my proposal.
And the deletion of lines 62 through 65.
Well, it is deleted.
That's with the edits, but I believe you wanted, didn't you want to
That's
remove
part
the
of
word residential on the building height?
No.
That's the,
No, okay,
that's the
Uh,
edit she has. Okay.
misunderstood.
We're striking the term building, residential, building height, comma, residential. We're converting that to building height. We're referencing,
Okay.
as used in chapter 107, division 2, residential zoning district.
Okay, but
And we're retaining the deletion of lines 62 through 65, and we're not using the alternative that's in the paragraph, or keep this.
Right, okay. We
okay,
just wanted
but
to
when
make
I
sure we're
look
clear.
at line 42, it says building height, comma, residential.
And she's got that scratched out.
It's not scratched out on mine.
You're not looking at Brooks Edits version of that.
It's all handwritten edit.
Oh, the handwritten edits.
Yep.
Okay, I was looking at the wrong one. Okay,
Yep.
then second.
Okay. Amended motion by, or revised motion by
Oh,
Brooke
okay.
and second by Phil. So,
May I?
last comment, sure.
Okay, I just have one question. On line 118 in Councilwoman Brown's additions, I'm not sure that she still wants to have so long as such increase in height at a distance of at least 25 feet from the nearest property line. Did you want to keep that in there? Or?
No, I did not. Instead of that language, my motion would be that line 117 to 118 read, in such cases, the board may grant a special exception such that, such that the maximum height limits as stated in 10771B are increased for up to 5 additional feet of building height.
So this portion would get scratched?
Lines 117 to
No, no.
118 would be redrafted to add the additional clause.
So long as.
But not the so long as.
But no,
Not the so long as, thank you,
Yes.
thank you. And I appreciate Jay's bringing this to my attention because I missed it.
I knew there was.
Okay. Are we clear on what the wording change is there then? Okay. All right. Any additional discussion? We good to vote? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Motion passes 5-0.
And I do want, Mayor Pro Tem,
Yes, ma'am.
I would like to take a minute to give a big thank you to the CRCRC, Dave Bench, Tom Farrell, Duke Garwood, Alex Robinette, Javon Bavel, Jeff Marks, Brian Ryder, and for all their work that they've done on this project. I would also like to give a big thank you to the members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, Dave Bench, Tony Stein, Mike Rhodes, Brian Nash, Jeannie Nyer, Jerry Fleming, Michael Hall, for all the work they've done on this project. I would also like to thank the community members who have spoken up and come to the meetings and attended and given their advice and their comment and their participation, the benefit of their counsel to the commission and to both the Planning and Zoning Commission and to this council. And I would like to give a big thank you to our staff, Michaela and Nikki, Ashley now gone, and our new administrator, Alan, who have manned the meetings, kept us on track, answered our questions, and shared their experiences. And I would like to also thank Alter Studio for all their good work on this project.
Ditto. All right, we have had a request to jump to agenda item number 11.
Anytime you want to go.
This will be quick, Melissa, and then we'll go back to yours. Discussion and possible action regarding appointment to fill a vacancy on the Planning and Zoning Commission. Due to the resignation of Michael Rhodes, we have an opening on P and Z, and we have 2 applicants for that position, Sean Downing and Jay Van Bavel.
I have a motion.
Okay,
I would move that we appoint Jay Von Bavel to the open position on the Planning and Zoning Commission. Jay's been a tireless member of the CRCRC, did a beautiful job on the tree ordinance, and I think you'd do a fine job on planning and zoning, and so I would like to move to appoint Jay Von Bavel.
all right, we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, motion by Brooke, second by Kevin. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right. Motion passes 5-0. Welcome, Jay, to Planning and Zoning Commission. All right.
Appreciate you being willing to serve.
Yes,
Yes.
and Sean being willing to serve.
Yes.
Absolutely.
We will find a spot for him later. We will go back now to agenda item number 8, discussion and possible action on a recommendation from the Park Commission regarding proposals received for the alternative plan to the retaining wall project. All right, who wants to talk? Melissa?
Melissa Morrow, 2502 Timberline Drive, Parks Commission Chair. This has been a long time coming. This was approved almost probably more than a year and a half ago, and RCDC has funded it. And we got some great bids. They were wide-ranging in scale. Some people wanted to do what seemed like went above and beyond what was required of the bid. We did feel really confident that Gomez would do a good job. They do a lot of work in the community, and several people were familiar with them. And they also happen to be the lowest bidder, which we love. So, but we do think they do really quality work. So, if y'all have any questions, go right ahead.
So are we being asked to take action and approve the
Gomez bid.
Bid, okay.
And that's what, we had a motion from Parks recommending it to you all.
Okay, great.
Okay, and you're confident that their bid includes all of the essential items?
Yes,
Because they're very brief.
they're very brief.
And so
And
I
Mas
was
Verde
not
was
clear.
very wordy.
I was not clear from their bid that they had, from the wording of their bid and from the dollar amount of their bid, that they had included everything, so.
They did, and I can tell you one comparison to Mas Verde. Mas Verde included a rain garden and something else that was way above and beyond what we were having a plan for. So that, if you took those two things out, and I can't remember what the other thing was, then they really were very similar. But we really believe that Gomez has seen the picture of what we want it to look like, and they're like, done, that's what we're gonna do.
And they're familiar with the site, and they know what
They've
they
been-
have
they
to,
came
what they have
twice.
to demo.
Yes, yep,
And what they're starting with and all of that too. So,
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, move to approve.
Second.
All right, any additional discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay.
And thank you to
Right.
Parks Commission for
Thank you,
getting this
Parks.
proposal together and
Thanks,
before us.
RCDC.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
And
thanks to
Alex,
RCDC too.
it's
Yeah,
such
it's
it's such a better plan. It's
It-
fantastic.
much better plan. I think it's gonna be really beautiful.
Yeah.
And then we have one more thing.
Okay.
Yes. We'll go on to agenda item number 12, I think it is. No, we're nine, okay. Discussion and possible action on a recommendation from the Park Commission to authorize funding for a partial survey of Rollingwood Park to be used to facilitate planning for future improvements.
Yes. So it turns out we don't have a survey, which makes it really hard. In particular, when we look at doing some improvements to the parking areas, that's what we're really looking at this point. And so I think you can see in your packet, there's 3 different levels of what we could ask for in a survey. And we really just decided that we would let you all make the decision. Basically, 1 is to survey the entire park. 2 is to survey just the upper park, and 3 was just to survey the areas around our parking. And when I say that, I believe we actually drew a little picture around it. I don't know if it's included in your packet, but basically what we're talking about is the parking lot that is south of Field 2, east of Field 3, 4, and 5, between the field and the pool, and then the one that's north of Fields 3, 4, and 5. We just need a survey basically around those areas. I would include, I liked the bid that had $15 per tree. Because we do want to include the trees, obviously that's important in the part, dealing with the parking. But we're totally fine with not doing a full survey and just doing the areas around those parking areas.
And I'm just now seeing this bid price, so, can staff address what the cost of the different options are?
Yes, ma'am. So we did ask ATS, with whom we normally work for such things. They bid it conservatively, so they did say this is going to be kind of the high-end cost because of the time constraints they had from us between the Park Commission meeting and this meeting for it. So the full survey, which is the boundary and improvements only, they're saying it'd be 11,000 or no more than 11,500. The upper park boundary and improvements would be no more than 6,500. And then the portion of the park that Ms. Morrow just described would be no more than 3,500. The tree survey would be kind of an a la carte option of $15 per tree. And if we want to do topographical features as well, that would add either 5,000 for the upper park or 8,000 to the cost of the entire survey.
I don't see
Can we do
the,
topographic of just that area?
yeah, but it's,
Oh.
I don't think you're gonna need it, cause if you're talking about just the parking lot areas, it's pretty
pretty
flat. So there's not really a bunch of topo to shoot. And the grades are pretty obvious as far as which way it's gonna sheet flow, I think, but I don't think you need the topo, it's just my opinion, but that's just an opinion. We know what that's worth. Well, I'd be in favor of doing just the parking lot areas and including the trees, as you mentioned. It seems like a reasonable cost, and I certainly understand the need for it to plan parking lot improvements, and I think those parking lot improvements are sorely needed. I'm really glad to hear the Park Commission's focusing on the parking lot and what could be done to improve it. I think it's been a safety issue for a long time, and it's very inefficient as it is now. And so I certainly support that effort.
Which one, option 3?
Is that
Yeah, option 3 with the trees included.
So
Just
3
the
and
trees in
6.
that area.
Yeah, just the trees within the boundaries of that area and no topo, just to basically locate the pavement, the fencing, the grass, figure out. That'll help them lay that into CAD and start playing around with new parking lot configurations, see if they fit or not.
Do we have any other projects where more thorough survey would be useful?
Well, I don't know what y'all's plan is if you do the city hall and this area, if you consider that part of the park. That would be another huge project that I occasionally hear about.
But I think we should do that à la carte at that time. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
I think we ought to, yes, we haven't gotten very far on the design of City Hall, but I think at the time that we start doing that, then we'll worry about doing topos and surveys of this area. I don't think we need to include that in with this, nor do I think that the field house requires any kind of survey currently if we want to do anything with the field house.
Could we put on the agenda for our next meeting to talk about the status of the new city hall and, kind of see what's happening with that and what we want to do about it, if you don't mind?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Michaela.
May I say something?
Yeah.
I didn't prepare for this, but this is ad-libbing. Shanti Jayakumar, 3309 Park Hills Drive. When we did the park master plan, did they not do a survey? Just a question. I mean, that cost us like $25,000 for the entire park master
You would
plan.
have thought.
I couldn't dig up my thing. I didn't have the time, but
I know we've asked all the city staff and no one's been able to find it, because exactly like you, I thought for sure we'd ought
Yeah.
to have a survey because.
I have the park master plan somewhere, but I just couldn't get my hands on it.
We looked through that as well.
I mean,
We
I'm
looked
just
through
thinking
different
to
drawers in different
myself.
departments. We looked on the Travis County Clerk's website.
I'm just
Maybe it's
recalling
rolled up.
that was a big expense that we did to survey and chart out all the, where everything is. Surely that was part of the, I hate for us to pay double for all these things. So I just thought I'll bring that up for y'all.
I've seen that master plan and I didn't see a survey in it.
I don't think there was
No,
one.
there
No,
wasn't.
I
there
don't think
not
there
a
was
survey in
one.
it.
There probably was a survey done when we bought the property from the,
There's a meets and bounds
Yeah.
description
Meets
in
and
the
bounds
deed.
Just
you know.
boundaries,
yeah.
but it won't show where the fence is, where the edge
Oh,
of the
okay.
pavement is, and they're trying to locate like the ball field fences and the pavement edges,
Which came later, yeah.
which they can then
Right,
drop
right,
into a
right,
CAD
right.
program and start redesigning those
Okay.
parking areas.
That makes sense.
Well, just thought
Yes.
Yeah,
worth
it's a good,
telling
it's a
y'all.
good point.
We tried.
Yeah, we looked everywhere.
Yeah.
I feel like we saved some money, like on this
Okay.
proposal for the retaining wall project, snow and retaining wall project. I mean, didn't we have like 30, say they would do up to 30,000 or something?
That was what the original cost was. What did the new retaining wall project, what is the new Gomez that we just approved?
Is it
Like
20?
It's approximately 21,000,
Yeah.
and RCDC, if my memory serves me, approved up to 32.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Or 31, 32, somewhere in there.
something like that, yeah,
Yeah.
that's
I don't
great.
know if there's a way to like lump this into that.
Get our CDC to pay for this?
Yeah.
We could ask them to.
Part of a capital improvement,
It
The-
is,
I would think.
They had allocated, as part of their motion, the 32,000 or 31,000 was for erosion controls behind the field house.
Okay, all right.
we can come back to them later.
Well,
we
I
can
I
ask.
would,
So that covers
Because
the
they've
revised scope
slotted
of
a
the-
certain,
of
up
the
to a certain amount
plan, but, yeah.
annually, but we can certainly ask.
I'm happy with the upper park only in trees.
The parking areas only.
The half-park survey, as it's listed in the attachment.
Item
Yes.
3 and 6.
Yeah, half park survey.
The
That's right.
half-park survey at $3,500.
Yeah.
Option 3 plus option 6, the tree survey for the half-park area.
Great.
All right.
So,
Did we have an official motion?
Is that a motion?
is that a motion?
I was thinking you were gonna do the motion, but I can do the motion.
That's fine.
I move we approve, hiring ATS to do a half-park survey identified as option 3 in their bid proposal at $3,500 plus option 6 tree survey at $15 per tree for those trees that are in the half-park survey area,
Plus tax.
plus tax.
I don't think
If
we're going to be paying
applicable.
tax.
If applicable.
Okay.
That's the way they've quoted it, so just make sure. Okay, do we have a second?
A second.
Okay, motion by Brooke, second by Kevin. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Okay, motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you.
Okay, on to agenda item number 10. Discussion and possible action to approve the fiscal year 2025-2026 budget calendar.
So Mayor Pro Tem and council members, the proposed calendar in front of you very closely mirrors what you did last year. The days had to go forward and backwards a couple of days based on when Wednesdays fall. It all meets the, it's been reviewed by our legal department here, our legal services, and the calendar is legal so long as the tax rate that is proposed by council will not exceed the voter approval rate, which I thought was a safe assumption for the draft of the calendar.
I think that's a safe assumption.
I never like to assume too much, but I felt that was safe.
Well, that has been our normal procedure,
Yes.
to not require a vote on our tax rate.
I would move approval of the proposed budget and tax rate calendar. I will note I am out of town the Wednesday, June the 11th, but someone can catch me up, I'm sure. I don't know if I raise that only because if others are going to be absent, we may want to change that date, but if not, I can live with it. And
June what?
Well,
June
because
11?
Because it's a workshop, we don't have to have a supermajority, even if it's just a work, even if we're not taking any action? Okay. But one of them can be, nope, they all have to be in person, okay. Okay. Anybody else have a problem with June 11th?
Nope.
I'm looking.
Kevin's
It's,
birthday is 2 days before that.
Somebody's flying to MSP that day. Whoever that
Okay,
is.
the other one that might be,
You have to be physically
is
here.
Labor Day, September 1st? I mean, that's far enough away that might not be a problem.
It is September the 1st is
Okay.
Labor Day.
Anybody gonna be gone the week of Labor Day? Okay, all right. We can catch you up.
yeah, I think so.
Okay. So it was a motion, did we have a second?
Second?
Okay, motion by Brooke, second by Alec. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. All right, motion passes 5-0. All right, we've already done 11, so on to agenda item number 12. Discussion and possible action on a recommendation from Planning and Zoning Commission requesting a recommendation and next steps, such as scheduled public hearings from the City Council regarding proposed amendments to the Rollingwood Code of Ordinances, Chapter 107, zoning related to definitions and the placement of playhouses, playscapes, and mechanical equipment. So, we wanna have Dave explain, or Nikki? You good? Okay.
So, this actually comes to y'all from the CRCRC, actually, sorry, this comes to y'all partially from the CRCRC, but mostly from when we had the Playhouse on Pickwick that came to us, and y'all were to be looking at playhouses, playscapes, and then mechanical equipment locations, so they were accessory structures or buildings. We had a little bit confusion on how those were defined, how we were to interpret that in the code. What the Planning and Zoning Commission did is once we got the guidance from y'all, they started a subcommittee, and that subcommittee kind of came up with the different definitions of the playhouse, the playscapes, where they should be located, and how to differentiate the locations of them. So that is the one ordinance that you have written in front of you that gives you the definitions as well as the placement for those. And then on the other ordinance that you have in front of you is for mechanical equipment. The reason for this is mechanical equipment such as a pool, a generator, your ACs, HVAC units, anything of that is considered a structure currently in our code because it is built on a slab and structures can't encroach into a setback or into a required yard. So with that, it was kind of interesting on how those are playing out with the review process. So the commission did kind of come up with a definition of what mechanical equipment is, which does define out the generators, the pool equipment, and HVAC. And then it gives you the allowances of where they are allowed and where they're not. What we are asking is that y'all take a look at this, and the Planning and Zoning Commission did look at this. They did kind of go in and approve the language per se to bring forward to y'all, and they did that unanimously on 2 separate votes, 2 separate occasions. And what we're asking is for you to take a look at that, and then if possible, this will have to go through a public hearing before it is adopted. So I do have a few dates for that if y'all are interested in that.
Anybody have any questions, comments? I think we should take them one at a time.
I didn't have any on the mechanical, I did on the playscapes, I think. I'm just trying to figure it out.
Okay. Want to do the playhouse and playscape one first?
I'm ready to allow this to go back to planning and zoning for a public hearing. I don't think we need to spend that much time deciding if we like this exact language, because it will go back to planning and zoning for a public hearing.
Yes, we are judging you.
We are all judging you, Charlie.
I'm gonna kill my wife.
I think you got a
We
good
have it on
point.
public record,
Yeah.
I think you have a good point.
Yeah, I think what they need is just for us to, what is that?
Do you want to make that a motion to send it back?
I would move we approve the recommendation from Planning and Zoning to set a date for for public hearings on the playscape, the proposed playscape ordinance and mechanical equipment ordinance, and that I think so that's my motion.
Second.
And
So are you doing just one or both of them?
She did both.
both.
Okay.
And I would, as to public hearing, I'd like some discussion on whether there are other things pending that require public hearing at planning and zoning, and when we might set those dates, and whether we do a joint public hearing on it.
At this time, we don't have anything that's pending for a public hearing except for these 2.
I'd say public hearing in the summertime is usually not go over well,
Want to do it in September?
because a lot of people are gone.
I do have the potential dates if y'all are interested in that.
Sure.
So with the timetable that we have to notify with the mailed notices and the newspaper, the next P&Z meeting that it could go to, if y'all would like to do a joint, is the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting on the regular scheduled agenda date of June 4th. So actually, sorry, that's not enough notice. If we wanted to do a joint meeting on y'all's next scheduled council meeting, so the June meeting on June 18th, we could do that, but planning and zoning would have to attend y'all's meeting for that. And then we could jointly do that if that is one. If not, if you wanted to kind of do them separately, the next P&Z meeting, if y'all wanted to do them separate, would be the July 2nd one. And then the council meeting for July 16th.
Is there gonna be a July 2nd P&Z meeting?
I'm
It's a-
sorry? Is there gonna be a July 2nd?
Right.
Well, I guess it depends on whether or not there's subject matter to discuss.
I was gonna say, a lot of the boards and commissions don't meet in the summertime because you can't get enough people for a quorum, and the week of,
4th of July.
4th of July.
at my office, the week of 4th of July was just as bad as the week of Christmas. It was like nobody there, so.
Can we just do it in September?
We
And
also
let's do
have
it as a
August,
joint,
but
a joint meeting.
This isn't critical.
Let's do it in a joint meeting so we don't have to do 2 notices and do it in September. That's what I'd suggest.
That's what I would suggest too. And this is residential code, so it would require
full notice.
individual mailings, doesn't it? So I think it saves us money and effort to do a joint meeting, joint public hearing. So I would agree with your recommendation.
Do we wanna, anybody have any tweaks to these before we publish them for a public meeting? A public hearing? I have a few comments, if nobody else does. The definition of playscape, where it says has no solid floor. A lot of the playscapes have, upper levels that have a solid floor. And so I don't know why the solid floor is a part of that definition, but I think that is unnecessarily restrictive.
My understanding from the Planning and Zoning Commission, the intention was, I think, a ground level floor, so as to preclude the growth of grass. I don't think they were considering a second level where it's open below. Because I know there's a lot of focus on, could the sunlight get there, could the rain get there?
And I think we should clarify that.
Yep.
And then on the taller playscape, where it says the D3, the playhouse must be set back at least 6 feet from any property line. We have setback requirements for fences. I don't remember the side fence is 15 feet from the curb or from the property line?
It's gonna be from the curb,
Because it can be
Um,
on the property line.
but
Oh, you're talking about
Not
like
on-
from the front?
Not on the side yard, on
but
the, on the,
playscapes may be in the required side or rear yard.
right.
Okay, so if it's in the side on the corner, yes, I get it.
I did not follow that.
Yeah, can you explain what you were thinking?
Okay, if you have a house on a corner,
Mm-hmm.
you have a requirement that the fence if you have a fence, that it can't be any closer than 15 feet from the curb, right? And the side, but then 10 feet of that is the
Right away.
the right of way.
10 feet is
So-
what?
Is the right of way
10 feet of what is the right of way?
10 of the 15 feet that you have from the curb to the fence, 10 feet is the right of way. And so you could put it, I guess that would allow you to put it just inside
The
the
allowable
side
fence.
So,
Mm-hmm.
okay.
Okay.
I wasn't wasn't remembering if if 15 feet was from the curb or from the property line.
When you say the first 10 feet on a residential lot, on a corner lot, from the curb to the first 10 feet on the side yard is right-of-way?
Often.
From the curb? Yes.
Right-of-way for what?
Street right away.
Street right away, period. Just city right away.
So your property line is 10 feet from the curb, in most cases.
It's crazy, but that's what it is. We don't own the first 10 feet from the curb of our yard.
There are
Okay,
some
you're saying that,
plats
so
that do
it's not, so the setback begins at the property line. And-
The setback does, but where you can put the fence. There's a fence
And the fence is where?
15 feet from the curb, right.
So it would be inside the property line, 5 feet within the
Yep.
property line?
That's right.
Okay,
Right.
now I'm following.
Right, so
following.
I just wanted to make sure that that you couldn't have a playhouse closer to the street than you could have the
Right.
fence. So I just wanted
So
to make
it'll
sure
be a
that was
foot,
clear.
it'd be a foot inside the fence.
Right.
In that scenario, if they put
Yeah.
it as close as they could.
Okay.
But I love the idea of letting planning and zoning work through. Got a fresh member.
We do beat this up pretty good.
And on the mechanical one, for the backyard, there's no distance.
What line are you on, please?
36?
It just says required backyard.
Line
Right.
36
Yes.
of,
So you can put it all the way
Of
up
the
to the
mechanical
fence.
equipment ordinance.
Oh, you're a mechanical?
Yes. So you can put it up against the fence in the back.
Yes. We did not specify otherwise. That's right.
And we had talked before about requiring all of this stuff to be in the buildable area. And to me, that's a huge change from in the buildable area to right up against the back fence. And I am surprised that P and Z recommended this because I thought one of the members of P and Z had a problem with a neighboring pool equipment that was up against the back fence that was noisy.
the side
And
fence.
Was it that, their side fence?
Side fence.
Okay,
Yeah, and
well, side fence, back fence, doesn't make any difference if it's up that close to your house, it's still
we
gonna
did
cause a
not-
problem.
Yeah, not all of these things passed by everybody.
Okay,
These votes were not.
okay.
The-
I would not be in favor in allowing it to go all the way with no restriction in the backyard. And if we make these changes, are existing installations grandfathered? Because
Yes.
we do have, I've walked around the neighborhood just to look and see where everybody's AC units and generators and, stuff that you can see from the street. And we do have a couple houses that have their AC equipment in front of the house. Your generator's in front of your house.
Side yard?
It's in front of your house.
I don't know that I would define that as the front of my house. I think it's in the defined side yard.
Let's get a satellite image up right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm just wanting to make sure that we don't, penalize people who already have their stuff installed. And also that we are, careful about the screening. We've got a lot of people that have AC units on their side yards.
Sure.
And so, having to screen those, if it's new equipment, but then if somebody has one that's there and they replace it, do they then have to screen it if it's a
This is in
replacement unit?
zoning, so it's existing units would be grandfathered. I don't think unless it required a permit, would this apply?
Replacement does require a permit.
Because it's a zoning requirement, not a,
A new AC unit requires a permit?
Mhm.
Okay.
Really?
It does.
Replacing one does?
All right, can we get rid of that?
Yeah.
Thanks for
I
bringing
was
that to
to
my
say,
attention.
there's
I'll
probably
be
nobody
bringing
in
that
the
up at the
city
next
that knows
meeting.
that.
Electrical alone.
Yep.
Oh.
I didn't hear that, I'm sorry.
Electrical alone, I mean, you gotta get an electrician to do it. It's gonna require a permit.
The
AC
AC,
unit doesn't
the
require
AC
electrician.
company does it.
Really? They don't have to connect the AC to electricity?
They do.
It
It's
doesn't require an
an
electrician.
Box.
And that's the only-
HVAC contractor.
It's got a shut off that's on your house typically, and then a line, and then what they're gonna do is disconnect the line from the L unit and connect it to the new unit.
I'm pretty sure.
It's still the mechanical building code.
I've never had an
We're getting a
electrician come
feel.
out when I replace my AC unit.
We're getting a little afield, I
Yeah.
think.
Well, I'm trying to clarify who this would apply to. And if it applies to somebody that has an existing house and has an AC unit that's on their side yard and they get a new AC unit, are they gonna then have to do the screening?
Good question.
It is a good question.
I would think no, unless they were fully moving it. If you wanted to relocate it.
Right,
But
well,
if you're
just from-
repair and
from a
replace,
Legal standpoint, what,
Yeah, I have to read our code provisions on non-conforming uses and structures and then see what it says, so I
Okay.
can't say.
all right, well, we're not voting on it now, I just, those are the things that came to mind when I was reading this that we would need to clarify and.
Well, I think the question would be, do you want it to come back here for us, for the council to address those questions before we send it back, or do you want to go ahead and send it back? Or set it for public hearing and have that's what I think, that's where I think we are.
If you don't think it's ready for prime time, we can take it back and look at it some more.
I would suggest that since we don't really want to have a public hearing before September anyway, why don't you guys work on it and
Yeah.
take those notes and see what you can do with it.
Yeah, we could do that.
I like the sound of
Okay,
I move we send
Build your playhouses before the law
The-
changes.
two draft ordinances in item 12 back to planning and zoning for consideration of the council's comments and further work with a public hearing to be considered in September.
Second.
all right, motion by Brooke, second by Kevin, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye,
Aye.
any opposed say nay. All right, motion passes 5-0. Okay. Agenda item number 13. Discussion and possible action on addressing setback orientation for lots with limited street frontage. This is my agenda item, and the wording was tweaked from what I submitted. I said with no street frontage. And the issue that I think we need to think about is there are, and I haven't looked at a map to make sure that I have counted all of the various properties that this impacts. But we have at least 4 that Nikki and I have just thought of off the top of our head. Lots that the only street frontage is the driveway. And so the driveway, you know, our code requires for a legal lot that it have 100-foot street frontage. And there are some that are back behind other lots. And so there's a driveway that comes to the street, but there is no effective property line on the street. And so I have a neighbor who has one of these lots behind them, and she asked me about you know, what they were gonna be able to do back there, and I said, oh, this is interesting. I said, how do you set, not what you measure from for the setbacks, but how do you orient the setbacks when you don't have street frontage? Because right now, we've defined the, you know, the front of the lot is the addressed lot, the addressed side that faces the street. So that's where you have a 30-foot setback, behind it's a 20-foot setback, and then you have the two sides that total 25 feet. But if you're not on the street, what orientation are those setbacks supposed to be at? And because you're back in the middle of things, you are going to be abutting other lots. Those lots are gonna abut other lots that are probably mostly backyards, but also could be side yards depending on how the lot is oriented. And I just, one of them, did you look that one up on Inwood Cove to see how that one was oriented? There's one on Inwood Cove that was the subject of a lawsuit a number of years ago because it was separated off from a lot on Timberline, and it had no street frontage, so you couldn't access the lot at all. And the lawsuit was trying to find where they could put a driveway in so you could actually access the lot. So when that came up, we didn't really worry about what the orientation of the setbacks were. We were trying to get them to be able to actually get to the lot. So that one's already been rebuilt, and that one is not likely to be an issue. But there's one where the home on this interior lot has been demolished, and so it is liable to come back at some point in the not too distant future. And I just thought that we needed to address this before we have somebody turning in a plan that we have to then say, well, we don't really know what you're allowed. And so I would recommend that we send this to P&Z for y'all to P&Z to look at. But if anybody has any thoughts on how we would orient that, if we want to make an exception on the setbacks for those lots, if you do an average all the way around instead of having the, you know, the 30, 20, whatever, because right now a 30-foot street setback also has the 10-foot right-of-way, so those are really 40 feet from the curb. But you would not have the right-of-way issue on those lots, so they would really be 30 feet from the property line, and not have extra property on the, you know, around the.
Would there be any lot of any of these lots that would be adjacent to a street? I don't think.
No, they're not.
Yeah.
No, that's
so
what
I
I'm
don't
saying.
think the right-of-way would be an issue.
Right.
Okay.
But right now, if on all lots that do have street frontage, you have the 10 feet that looks like it's part of your yard that's not part of your property, right? And the setbacks are from that point. So you have a smaller building area than what the property area would seem to allow, but when you don't have the right-of-way, you only have the setbacks that you're not able to build into.
Yeah, I'm a little, I think the description in this one sheet is a little bit less than clear, because it says that the setbacks are based on street frontage, but the setbacks are based on the property line. The orientation is based on street frontage. And so when we're asking planning and zoning to look at this, are we asking them to address just the orientation? Or are we asking them to change the size of the setbacks, or to review the size of the setbacks? Now, you know, in the residential zoning code, and I think you're talking about residential properties here, all of the setbacks are defined from, the width of the setbacks are defined from the property line. So
This is, The
which,
the intention of my agenda item was to address the orientation,
orientation, okay.
which is what it says in
I just
here.
wanted to make that clear.
Yes, and after I turned it in, then I started thinking about how you would, make this fair for everybody and appropriate for everybody. And that's when I said, well, maybe you could change the dimensions of the setbacks, because there's not really a front or a back or based on the street access for these lots. So that would be something that P and Z could look at and then give us a
So
recommendation
both the
as well.
orientation and the size of the setbacks.
Yes, if you change the setbacks to make them consistent all the way around for those interior lots, then the orientation doesn't matter.
Is that, what you just said, is that interesting to you, to make it that way?
I think that I don't have a good way to, or I don't have a, doesn't impact me personally, so I don't have any preference that I have come up with. I think we just need to look at all of the aspects of this and decide what is most appropriate and fairest to everybody. In some cases, one of these houses, it backs up to the city of Austin at one point, so, we're not really as concerned about say that. It's not backing up on that side, it's not backing up to another Rollingwood resident. And then some of the other ones are back up to the bluff over Bee Caves, so there's no other houses behind them there. So,
Are there even 5 of these in Rollingwood?
there's at least
Yeah,
4.
I'm trying to think of,
There's-
where these might be. I
there's at
can't
least
come up with even 5.
We've
Some
come up
over on
with
Nash.
4 that Vicki and I came up with, and like I said, I have not looked at the whole map and
Okay.
identified all of them, but
Yeah, there's, what I would suggest is identify the properties and then just go through them one by one and just kind of put yourself
Sure.
in the shoes of the neighbor and of the property owner, what would be fair.
right.
There are, excuse me, there are some codes that get very specific about addresses. Not in our code, but I know other codes do that. And I'm wondering, is that what you're looking for this particular lot? Do you want to establish what the orientation and setback requirements are going to be? Or do you want a more general houses that are off the street behind other lots?
Yes.
General.
And I
This is-
don't wanna do a one-off for one property.
Okay, all right.
I don't
Just to be
think
clear.
that's a good policy.
All right, okay. I'm going to ask staff to identify where these properties are.
And,
Okay, so,
and we can ask planning and zoning to look at this, decide whether they think it's something that needs to be addressed, and if it does, what they recommend.
yeah.
Is that what we're gonna do?
Well, I think, I talked to Brooke about this, and you said that right now it says that if there's any uncertainty, that the building official gets to decide?
That was removed when we changed
Did it? Okay.
did the front yard requirement.
Okay,
But-
that's the way we used to have it, and that to me puts Nikki in a bad position, and that to me is where we are right now. If it comes in and we don't have this defined,
What would happen today if the lot is not, if you can't apply the current setback requirements to that lot, then they would need to seek a variance. And
Well,
so
it's-
it would go to Board of Adjustment for approval of any variance.
well, it's not that they can't meet the setbacks, it's like, how do you orient the setbacks?
Well, but you also talked about the size of, having them address the size of setback. That would be a variance.
Right.
So-
That, if we decide to change that, if we don't change that, we still have to address the orientation issue. because right now, that's not really well-defined, and
Or
we
we
haven't
could-
given Nikki any guidance on how we wanna handle
Yeah.
that, so.
Well, we do have some words about, you know, the front entrance of the house needs to face the street kind of thing. you
The
know, or-
address to
yeah,
street.
we have that.
But she's
Well-
saying these lots don't abut an address street.
They
Well,
don't,
they do face the street though.
but they're just
The
behind.
driveway.
They're still behind.
I'm
So
sorry.
They would essentially take the same orientation as the house in front of them.
Yeah, it's like, it's still the driver, it's still, there is a street they come from, and the front would still have to face that street, even if it's set back 200 feet.
Does it have to?
I think that's how it would be interpreted, but
Well, we can make it so.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's
but
what we want.
that may not make the
I
most
don't
sense
think we
for
can
the.
decide this tonight.
I don't
Right,
either, and
right. I
I'm
don't
concerned
think-
about trying to solve problems in the abstract, but I think it is a good thing for planning and zoning to think about.
I would think there are probably some of these where the house is not facing the street, that the road has access to. So I'm thinking,
Yeah.
anyway,
Yes.
This
I-
makes a very, very good point that you brought up. There's one house, 203 Ashworth, you know, the
Oh.
only access for it is from
I forgot of it,
Ashworth.
so that's
You have to go
fine. So we have at
all the
least-
way
that's
down.
at least
You can't see
five.
the house.
No, that's at
Right.
least 5 then, I
Yeah.
forgot about
That
that
is a
one.
very, very unusual situation.
And
Yes.
that, and
You
that,
can't apply any of these.
well, and that
to
house
the-
does not face the street.
That's what I'm saying. 203 Ashworth, if you put it up, you have to go from Ashworth, where there is 201 Ashworth, and there's a very long driveway, and you wonder where it's taking you. And it goes all the way down, and there's just that one house. Doesn't face Ashworth, doesn't face anything. It's right
This
there.
is more toward Hatley. I mean.
No, take a look on
Okay.
your.
Well, yeah, it
map.
probably does more face towards
But-
Hasley than it does towards Ashworth, which is the address.
You know, it
but-
brings up a lot of issues for fire safety, for access to emergency vehicles, all kinds of stuff. Nobody has talked about it, so it's a good thing you brought up
Right.
to take.
So, anyway,
We'll take a look. We'll do
okay.
something.
All right, do we need a motion for that, or can we just let them?
I think we can put it on the agenda. I think
Okay.
it's easy.
Okay. All right, we will pass that on to P and Z and move on to agenda item number 14. 14, discussion and possible action on installation of a valley gutter at the intersection of Vale. Okay, this got changed too, and it doesn't make as much sense this way. Discussion and possible action on installation of a valley gutter at the intersection of Vale Street and Bettis Boulevard and other water diversion structures. It's not an and, it's an or. We need to do something to address the drainage that comes from Bettis, down Bettis and then crosses Vale. Right now, the water turns, and then my directions in Rollingwood are always weird. So it kind of comes southeast, and then it turns around the corner and goes northeast, and then it goes across the road in the middle of the street. And if it's raining really hard, it goes over the curb and right down to their front door.
Whose front door? You said their front door?
305 there.
Yes, for the home on Vale.
305.
Who's that?
Rachel.
We don't-
You're saying the one in the picture.
Is there a picture?
Is there a picture?
yes.
In the public comment?
Okay.
Yeah, there's a picture.
Well, I know there's a
Oh,
picture.
on the public comment, okay.
Public.
No, that is not,
Right.
that is not the picture of the house that's being affected.
Okay.
No,
Oh,
that is
well, that one
305
is.
Vale.
305 is.
It is, the picture of it.
The,
one,
the
okay.
house with the
Yes.
fire plug in front is the house that's affected.
Yes.
305 Vale.
305 Vale.
There's a
They have,
picture.
they have done some grading and made changes, but they had water all the way up to their front door, in a recent heavy rain. And it goes rushing through their side yard and out, to the street. And we had talked about this a number of years ago when we were doing some paving projects, and I said we should put a valley gutter in there because we want the water, same as, we talked about at the same time we talked about the valley gutter at the end of Nixon at Hatley, which was put in, but was not put in properly. Because we have places where the water is coming down the street, and it, instead of continuing on to the final drainage point, it comes around a corner and then it impacts other homes before it gets to the final destination.
Can you tell us again where the water's flowing? Now that I'm looking at this picture and I've got a map up, is it coming from Bettis?
It's coming down,
Bettis?
most of it's coming down Bettis.
Mostly going west to east, right? And it gets to Vale
Ish.
and it doesn't cross the street at Vale?
It does not go, it does
There's
not
a
go
hump in the
straight,
street.
does not go straight across the, because of the way the gutter is curved,
Mm-hmm.
it goes around the corner and then it goes across the street.
There's also a hump in Bettis.
Crown,
Well, there's
yeah.
some, there's
So-
crowning in all the streets to try and get the water to go to the curbs.
So it
right?
turns
So-
left in this picture that we're
Yes.
looking at?
Yes,
Okay, and then it crosses the street like right near the homeowner's front door? Is that
right
where
by
it
the
crosses?
front sidewalk, and it,
Okay, so you're saying it should go straight across Vale on Bettis and stay in line with the Bettis curb?
yes. And
Okay,
stay
'cause
in the,
that-
stay in the street and then continue down to,
Because otherwise, right now, it's like turning north, crossing the street, and then turning south again to get back to Bettis?
Exactly,
Yes,
but at the moment
yes.
there's also a low spot in the picture there, right just to the right as we're viewing it of the mailbox. So it'll pool there. Then later on during the rain event, it gets to jump the curb. So it jumps the
Right.
curb and it flows down those people's front
Oh.
walkway right up to their house.
and
Got it.
brings all kinds of dirt and debris that it's
Right.
deposits in front of their house, and
So do we need to get an engineer to design this for us?
when we are doing the repaving, it would be best to take care of this before we do the repaving or in conjunction with repaving. But we need to address this drainage issue.
My question is, how do we address it? Do we do it by authorizing the city to engage the engineering firm to design a gutter? Is that the first step?
I would think that
I
would
would
be,
think so, yes, sir.
or a diversionary structure.
Or whatever they
It doesn't
recommend?
necessarily have to be a valley gutter. Valley gutter would make sense. It would also provide, traffic calming. That people go ripping down that street.
What is a valley
It's the
gutter?
concrete swale they put in the middle of the paving or crosses the
Okay.
road.
Sometimes called a pilot channel, like a little V of concrete.
Okay,
Wow.
Yeah,
surface drainage.
It's just a dip.
just a little concrete
The
dip.
opposite of a speed bump.
And
Right,
exactly.
this would go, take the water from
It take it,
Bettis across Vale.
yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
it's just to keep it going straight down and not curving around and then coming across towards there.
Well, I make a motion, we authorize the city to engage the engineers to study drainage solutions for this problem at Bettis and Vale to be built in connection with our repaving.
Second.
That's great. The other potential would be to do I've not talked that much tonight. Kevin.
No,
Just
you're
chill.
doing great. I have no complaints. You're doing a great job.
You could also do a speed bump, which I think is not as well preferred by the emergency responders. But something, we just need something that
The
keeps
mayor
the
would
water
not-
going straight across and not around the corner. The comments that were submitted are across the street from this, so clearly we don't want to make the water go across Bettis to the other side of the street, but we just need it
Right.
to not go into their front door. And, just in a little history note, I was going through some boxes of Rolling Wood files and I came across a memo, was it 2006?
something like that.
I think, so it was even before I was on council, so clearly we got a copy of this memo when we were talking something after I got on council. But this property was identified as a problem for the drainage in 2006, so it's been a really long time that this has been, an issue.
The
And so-
305 property.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. Not the same house, but the previous house had problems as well, just because of the lot and the way the street is graded, so.
Understood.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
Mhm.
Any further discussion?
Well, the discussion to the comments that were submitted, having it goes continue down Bettis, which I think is what we're thinking the engineers will determine how best to deal with the water flow, correct?
Right.
Right, so it may be going straight down Bettis, maybe something else. Okay, that's all. I do want to take into consideration the getting out of the driveway issue that was brought up by the comments. So, but, yeah, that's it.
Well, we have no control over
Yeah.
the volume of water that comes down the
I
street,
understand
so
that, yeah.
we just
I
wanna make
agree.
sure that it
It's an
doesn't go.
act of God.
Is
If God doesn't
this a
like
lone
somebody-
case, or is this just one of several?
We can't help that.
I'm guessing 1 to 7.
It's one right now.
Yeah.
It's one right now, yeah, and when you talk to Tom Farrell, he'll often, excuse me, when you talk to Tom, he'll often talk about, whenever we talk about drainage problems, he'll say, well, there's really only about 5 houses or lots here that have really problems with drainage, in the kind of, I think, the way you're describing. And I'm wondering if there are other addresses here that if you're gonna do something with one, if you wanna look at more than one, it might be worth, I'll ask Tom what those other places are, but
I mean, if there are other problems that we can do, and then one of the problems I have with like just city government in general is we get one problem, we try to solve it, and then we wanna scale it up and solve 5 other problems at the same time,
Yeah.
and then nothing ever gets done. And it's very frustrating.
We
I- agree, but-
doing drainage projects right
Yeah.
now to address
Yeah.
drainage issues that we have in other places.
that's
so.
right. Well, I'm only taking off of your, following your lead in that, that things are gonna get repaved here pretty soon. And if you were gonna do something, this is the time to do it.
It's a good point.
That's all, just
Good
that.
point.
Like, just ask the question, is there anything else out there that you wanna do? That's all.
And we can certainly look, and if anybody has any other issue, we could fix the one at the end of Nixon that should have been properly installed also, but.
The way I would cut this is, this can be fixed with paving. We have a whole drainage study that identifies and prioritizes our other drainage issues. And if there is another drainage issue that can be fixed while we're doing the repaving, and we know about it, let's do it. But I would not, I think once we get into bigger drainage, we need to go back and revisit that study and set our priorities, and they're very expensive. So if this can be done with repaving, I think we just stick with, is this a repaving issue?
Yeah, to my knowledge, in my short tenure here, there are 2 places in the city that don't appear to be addressed by the drainage work we're doing at the moment, this being one of them. The other one is at 4824 Rollingwood Drive, I believe, Miss Shaw. And there's a water, like a storm drain inlet by her home that we're trying to unclog there's an unusual arrangement of some sort of cistern on the one side. We're trying to unclog the pipe between those. So that, if that doesn't work for her as the solution, that might be a more expensive, most certainly not covered by
Yeah.
repaving. But those are the only 2 that I'm aware of at the moment. And so once we try to unclog that pipe, which is he's been working on renting the right equipment for it, then we'll know more about her issue. But I think that's the only other one I know about. And this is the one that's, I think, the easiest for us to fix.
Okay. Any further discussion?
No.
All those in favor say aye.
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 All opposed say nay. All right, motion passes 5-0. to agenda item number 15. Discussion and possible action to clarify allowable times for construction activities, including defining activities impacted. And this one again got changed a little bit. I was just saying, including defining the activities that are impacted. And I had put in parentheses to include things such as construction, landscaping, utility work, and tree trimming. So Google Fiber has been working for a while. They were working 7 days a week. I complained to the mayor when I had somebody outside my house at 8 o'clock on a Sunday morning making this noise, and I said, really, we're letting them work every day? This is really noisy. We need, how is it they are working on Sundays? And Saturdays? Because our code right now talks about construction hours for construction, which are only allowed from 7 in the morning to 7 at night, Monday through Friday, and then indoor finish work from 10 to 4 on Saturday, and no construction work on Sundays or city holidays. So we have other activities. First of all, I couldn't find a definition of construction in our code. So what all is included. And then after that, is landscaping, somebody mowing their yard, you know, people are gonna do that on the weekends. I'm not worried about that. Somebody installing landscaping where you've got backhoes and, you know, big heavy equipment and stuff, is that allowed on the weekends? Utility work, which is what the case is for Google Fiber. Apparently they had been given authority to work on weekends, and then we had enough people complaining, I think, that Gavin told them, you know, lay off on Sundays. And I've also noted tree trimming work. That's also very noisy when you have a crew out there with tree trimming and, you know, big chippers and all of that stuff. So people don't know exactly what's allowed and what's not. And so they don't know when to call the police and complain, because they don't know if they just have to suck it up and deal with this because, you know, it's just allowed to happen. And we don't have good definition on what is construction. Is it just when you have a contractor there, or is it, you know, I don't think we want to restrict something that a homeowner's doing on their own home, if that even still happens anymore. But whatever, but we don't have any definition on that, and so.
And just kind of our guideline that we've always used is that if that property is under a permit. So if they're putting in landscaping onto a home that's not occupied, we don't allow that. But if it's a homeowner who has a yard company that's mowing their yard, we've never, we've always allowed that to take place.
But what if there is an occupied house that is having a big landscaping project done? They don't have a permit for that, because we
Correct.
don't have a landscaping permit.
Correct. And so we have allowed that because it falls under landscaping, and
Right.
landscaping is not part of the construction site.
So that, this to me is another one of those things that I think that we need to mull over, get some input from P and Z and see if there is any input, and if we need to make any adjustments to our code to clarify when, and also for us to decide what we think is appropriate, because right now, the mayor is allowed to allow the utility companies to work whenever, and I personally don't like that idea. It's like you kind of have to have one day a week where it's like quiet, but we don't have any restrictions on that, so because that is up to the discretion of the mayor. And you know, if it's a one-off, that's one thing, but if it's like every Sunday for months, that gets really old, so. Anyway, I just wanted to bring this up for people to think about, and then also I think this would be a good one to send to P and Z for them to provide some input on.
I took a look at this. Construction, the term construction's used 171 times in the code in lots of different situations. There is a provision, there is a section that addresses work done on weekends,
Right.
and 101-247. It has an exception for minor construction that is defined as maintenance and repair work normally associated with home or business ownership and occupancy. Minor construction and demolition normally associated with home or business ownership and occupancy, landscaping, mowing, fencing, painting, provided that no such activity creates a nuisance condition related to noise, traffic, odor, dust, or other conditions, and is not in violation of any other city ordinance. I would think that for purposes of what you're trying to get to, you ask P and Z to look at this 101-247F. And not the 170 other times construction is used in the code. So that it can be defined for purposes of nuisance and noise and weekends. And then, we don't, I think that would, if that would address the concerns you have.
Yeah, that's fine. I just, when I was reading that section and it said, this is what you can do, and I couldn't find a definition of what was included in construction. And so that was my concern, because, like I said, people don't know when they're allowed to complain to the city. So when the Google Fiber was out there on Sunday morning, I was getting texts from neighbors going, is this okay? Are they allowed to be doing this? Why are they, and I'm going, I don't know, they're not, not normally supposed to, so, which is why I texted Gavin and I said, did we let them do this on Sundays? But I think we need to have better clarity so people know so the police know what to enforce, people know when to call the police because somebody's doing something they're not supposed to, and that, we have a reasonable.
I know another issue that we've always had too is sometimes on Saturdays, roof repair, it requires the use of tools.
Well, that's a
But
good
it's
one, too.
homeownership
Right.
too, right? So we've always allowed it to happen because it's homeownership and homeowner repair, so, it's kind of, but it does fall under the noise where it would create
Right.
tools.
No, that's a good one to
Yeah.
consider also, so. Anyway. Okay. We need a motion on that, are we good for adding that to
P and Z's docket.
P and Z to consider?
I think we can add it too.
All right. All right, so agenda item number 16. This is discussion and possible action to clarify the definitions of impervious cover in various locations in the drainage criteria manual and the city's code of ordinances. So, we have a unique situation where we have definitions of impervious cover in at least 3 places that I've found in the code. And then the drainage criteria manual has a method of calculating impervious cover that is different from the other definitions, where in that case you are allowed to exempt or not include the horizontal area, surface area of a swimming pool. Which a swimming pool is by definition impervious cover, because that's the whole point of a swimming pool, is not to allow the water to drain into the ground, right? So it is clearly impervious cover. But for the calculation of that total area of impervious cover, that is exempted in the drainage criteria manual. When the drainage criteria manual was prepared, it was intended to address residential issues, which residential issues do not have, there is no impervious cover limit in the residential area. The only reason you have to calculate the impervious cover in the residential area is to determine whether or not you have to do a water pollution abatement plan under the TCQ rules, which is a 20%, if you're above 20% impervious cover on a lot, you have to do the water pollution abatement plan. Commercial properties have a impervious cover limit, but, and I didn't look this up again, but I'm pretty sure that commercial properties are not allowed to have a swimming pool. So the exemption of that from the calculation is not an issue for commercial properties. So the only place that has both an impervious cover limit and the potential for a swimming pool is Western Hills, or the park zone. So park zone has a 50% impervious cover limit, and the park zone includes our park and the Western Hills Athletic Club. So they are supposed to meet the 50% impervious cover limit, but the way it was interpreted in their plans, at least this last time they brought the plans in, is that they excluded the swimming pool area because of this inclusion in the drainage criteria manual, which was not intended to be, it was not intended to exempt allowable impervious cover. Anyway, we need to clarify it so that it is clear going forward that the exemption for the impervious cover area of a swimming pool is only excluded from the calculation of impervious cover as it relates to the need for a water pollution abatement plan.
Relates to me, I say the last part again, as it relates to,
The calculation of impervious cover in determining whether or not you have to do a water pollution abatement plan. Yes?
The reason why swimming pools are excluded from impervious cover calculations, or why they're not considered whenever you're doing, working out your impervious cover requirements, is because whenever it rains on a swimming pool, the swimming pool fills up and then it drains off through some other means other than runoff. So pools,
Maybe.
pools are constant level. And so, if there's a drainage system on the pool, if it's an in-ground pool, then it automatically takes care of itself. You don't see pools running over during the rain. They always dispose in the regular sewer system. Now, if you want more clarity around that, or requirements that like an in-ground pool needs to have drainage to accommodate that, then you can talk about whether or not it needs to be excluded from an impervious cover calculation. And maybe that's what you want, I don't know. But there is a reason why pools are out of it.
I understand that.
Okay.
But there is, I understand your comments. There are also other reasons for having impervious cover limits. We are over the recharge zone of the Edwards Aquifer. And so we want to make sure that there is adequate recharge for the aquifer. More green space, more, less concrete, right? So it's, the reason that area is excluded from the calculation for a water pollution abatement plan is because the TCQ rules are designed to address water quality, and which is primarily solids, runoff of solids contaminating the watershed. And if the water is falling into a swimming pool, if it's washing anything into the swimming pool, that's going to settle out in the pool and it's not going to be carried off. So different purpose for the impervious cover limit in that particular case than from a recharge issue or something else. And we have a, like I said, the park zone area is the only place where we have both the potential to have a swimming pool and have an impervious cover limit. And so we just need to make sure that we clarify that.
Include that going forward.
So the drainage criteria manual is not zoning code, right? So this doesn't require public hearing or P and Z? So we could make this change without having to go through P and Z or with, public hearing. So. And actually, the definition in the drainage criteria manual of impervious cover means impermeable constructed or installed coverage of natural ground surfaces and includes only the footprint on a horizontal plane, vertical walls are not included. So that definition doesn't even exclude the swimming pool in the drainage criteria manual. It's just in the section where you're actually calculating the impervious cover, which is in 7.2.1H. It's the very last sentence of that, where it says, water surface area of swimming pools are not considered impervious cover.
That's in the drainage manual.
Mm-hmm.
I would recommend maybe bring this back at next meeting with that language and a recommendation on
with it just
changing.
tweaking?
Yeah,
Okay,
that would be what I would recommend.
all right, I can do that. All right, and we can, no further action on this one. Agenda item 17. Chief, this is discussion and possible action on the purchase of up to 5 license plate readers in an amount not to exceed $15,000 to monitor roadways entering Rollingwood.
Correct. So just to update you guys on that current project is that I have spoken with Flock, and also have spoken to other chiefs too to see how they're handling any type of PIRs and things that are happening. And so it really kind of came to a head where it was determined that Flock is the guardian of the record. And it, just to clarify, it is a license plate reader. It does not identify any type of person who's inside the vehicle. So we don't have any issue with like any racial profiling, and it only captures that vehicle information. So in order for it to become ours for that PIR, we would have to pull the data from their portal. And so when that data is being pulled from their portal, it's now being used as an investigative purpose. That's the only way we access it. Our policy would set out the parameters that we just can't pull data just to pull data. And so I think that's how we stay in line as far as the PIR stuff goes. And when I spoke with other area chiefs, they don't have any issues as far as the PIR stuff goes. I know that's the major hurdle that we're dealing with, or that we're trying to get through. But I was talking to the city administrator and kind of referenced it to kind of like the TLET system that we use to run your driver's license, run your vehicle information. It's owned by DPS. We have to, we request it, and it has to be within parameters. only for investigative purposes. We can't just run people's driver's licenses to run them and things like that. So this is kind of the same situation to where, but like I said, our policy would also set place to be able to safeguard and create to where like a punishable perimeter to if somebody was doing that outside of our policy. So like I said, I think that helps. Right now, we do have it mapped out that we do have 5 cameras, one being eastbound Las Lomas, one being westbound on Vale, one being northbound at Edge Grove, eastbound at Hatley and Park Hills, and then one at southbound Riley. And so that's just, and also I want to let you know that we do have a grant opportunity out right now that could possibly, and the way I'm looking at the grant is if we want to move forward at possibly applying with the grant, it does cover the license plates, or it would cover our project at 80%. We would be responsible for 20%, and that would be for a year. And so I kind of looked at it as, is this something that we can trial run these cameras for the year at that 20% rate to see if this is something that we're interested in, that we're finding to be useful. And if it's not, then we pull the cameras at the year, or we continue them. But I think it'll give us a good opportunity to see if this is something that works for the city. But like I said, I think we've also worked through some of those back-end hiccups that were kind of coming up. And the other thing that I did talk to Flock about and kind of proposed is that if there are more questions that the council does have as far as like the privacy and things about the camera, we can create a kind of like a work meeting. And I've spoke with Councilmember Brown as far as our police liaison, and also with city legal, and a Flock representative would be present too. That way we can iron out any issues that we possibly have. So like I said, we're kind of just filling it out to see how we would like to proceed. Like I said, I think it's in our best interest to go ahead and apply for the grant. If we decide to move on the grant, then we do, and then if we don't, we don't have to. But I think it probably is best for us to secure that opportunity.
Who's providing the grant?
Texas DMV.
Oh.
And it's based off catalytic converter crime, and I did talk to Flock. I said we've only had one here, I think maybe 2. I said, so we don't have much of that, and they, I was gonna say, I know yours, and then I know I had another one up in the, but they're seeing a high approval rate on this grant, so, like I said, I believe that it's in our best interest to try.
Do you have a map of those
Yep.
locations?
I do.
I was gonna say, is 5 enough to cover all of our
Yeah, and-
entrances?
So that's kind of the thing is we actually have more mapped out than the 5 to catch it going east and west if we did decide to go that route. I'm also going to provide you like some other information from Flock that they did send me today to kind of give to you guys. And then that way you can kind of reference those two. The other thing that is a possibility is also a 360 camera, which would create live feed for the park. If that is also something that we want to look into as well. Go ahead.
What kind of feedback do you get from the other chiefs about how useful the information is?
Everybody's adding to their actual Flock system. So nobody has pulled cameras or just adding more to them. There also is a transparency portal through Flock that anybody can access. We were actually looking at some data today. Tells you how many vehicles passed the cameras, how many hits that were from the cameras, who though that data is shared with as far as other agencies. So it actually, like I said, it provides some transparency. So, but I'm not concerned about any type of like privacy issues or racial profiling, because like I said, that data is not collected. But the other thing, and I know that you were talking about if 5 is enough, with this grant, with the fact that we would only be paying 20%, it would allow, if we budgeted, like the original cost would have been $22,000. But that includes that 360 camera. That would allow us to be able to add more cameras and stay under that $22,000 threshold if that's where, because like I said, we would only be paying the 20% for the first year.
Sounds like a great deal.
So, like I said, I believe, I think it's a good opportunity for, like I said, for us to test run these things and not have that big of a cost associated with it.
So all we have to decide tonight is whether to authorize to apply for the grant.
Correct.
All right.
That's it.
So move to authorize the police department to apply for the grant.
Second.
Any further discussion?
I love the police department. I love what you guys do in service for me. There's just something in me that is so against this idea. Like, it really is. Like, the privacy thing I can't get over. And some of the discussion about, like, okay, we have some cameras. Well, of course, the police like them. We'll add more cameras. We'll add a camera in the park. We're going to be, like, surrounded by cameras everywhere. That's just my opinion. Maybe I can change my mind at some point, but I'm going to have to vote.
Well,
on
I would point out that both Westlake Hills and City of Austin have these cameras.
Exactly.
And
that's
so you're
fine.
driving through them every day.
But it's not my city, you know?
And the benefit is that if a stolen vehicle enters Rollingwood, the police get a real-time
Well,
alert on that issue.
Well,
That's a
stolen
big
vehicle
deal.
will probably go through Westlake Hills and be picked up by one, and probably
Well,
go
they're not
through
gonna
Austin
follow
and
it
be-
into Westlake, into Rollingwood.
So, like, what are we gonna do with it? Like, how effective is this? Is this like 10%? Like, let you solve like 10%?
And so I think
That's what we're
So-
determining. What
right, and so that's what and that's why I am trying to go above and beyond. That way, we can get those questions answered for you, and then that way it'll kind of.
I like the test run too for that purpose, but the other great thing about them is that if somebody breaks into your car, okay, and robs your car in the driveway, you might have a security camera that identifies that car that came to your house, right? But it's not going to read the license plate. But you can go to the police department and say at 2 a.m.
I understand all this.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
understand like the sales from like that side. I get
Yeah.
that.
Okay.
My side is like different. I'm willing to like sacrifice some of the things like that. Okay, maybe my car does get broken into or I lose something for privacy and personal liberty. Like, that's just sort of where I stand
But I
on
think
this stuff.
the misconception is that
But-
your data is not actually pulled unless we're actually
But
looking
it's
for that
sitting on Flock
specific.
servers, and you're trusting
investigation.
Flock, and you're trusting them to like secure the data and not do something with it too. So I mean, and there's just an ongoing cost. This isn't going to be like a one-time $20,000 deal. It's going to be ongoing, recurring. You're going to like end up doing it and spend money. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I can change my mind, and it sounds like there's enough votes here to approve the grant, but I'm like, you know, to apply for it. But I'm just telling you, that's where I stand. I don't think I'll change my mind, but I might.
Yeah. please.
So one of the things that Flock brought up, as far as like privacy, invasion of privacy, you have a cell phone?
I understand, but I purchased this. I control this. This is my personal thing. I can decide. I can decide to leave it here and go somewhere. Now, what you're saying is you cannot leave the city of Rollingwood without a camera taking a picture of your license plate. It just sounds absurd to me. That's it.
Could cover it up.
I mean,
You're on a
that's,
public
that,
street.
to me,
It's
like,
a
that's not where I want to
public
live. That's just
It's
not
a
where I want to live.
public
I'm
street.
I know, but
I
that's
mean,
just,
what about the toll roads? Good Lord, they flash at you every time you go down there. And
but yeah, I have a choice to not write on that.
I
But
wonder
yeah,
how
I
many-
mean, I understand. Hey,
Yeah.
listen, this is
Yeah.
like this is what's happening. Right?
Right.
I see that that's the trend, but I'm not going to personally be involved in voting to like continue that because I just don't think it's right. It's just,
Would, in terms of aiding police apprehension, You're,
Well, I'm kind of
how do you weigh that versus the privacy issue?
I mean, personally, I think get out at night, maybe try and do the best job that they can do to like solve some of these things using the tools they have, not having pictures of us leaving every single intersection in Rollingwood. I see one way I could get out of here without being trapped. Like I could go down Ridgewood.
Yeah, you can hike out to the nature center. Get an
Yeah,
Uber.
so
Yeah.
that's just
Get
just
an
what-
Uber. That's a good way to go.
Well, that's true too. Well, I was thinking about that with all the self-driving cars. I was like,
Probably
how much
have
longer is anyone going to be driving actually?
True.
So anyway, yeah, that's just where I stand. But
Okay.
let's just get the vote.
Okay. I just want to
I'm ready to
kind
vote.
of
I was
get a
interested
feel
in hearing
for.
your perspective.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Michaela, we have a motion and a second, yes?
Yes.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay.
Nay.
Okay, motion passes 4-1. I will say, as somebody who had their catalytic converter stolen, probably in the middle of the night, and nobody had any pictures of it, so it was not caught. So, I am not worried about somebody knowing if I leave the neighborhood. But I would like to be able to catch the people that are doing stuff they shouldn't be doing, so. All right,
Move to adjourn.
Yay.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.